Hi, my name is Ranj Pillai. I'm the Deputy Premier of Yukon, also the Minister responsible for Economic Development, for Energy, Mines and Resources, the Yukon Energy Corporation and the Yukon Development Corporation.
Paint us a broad picture of the Yukon's competitive advantages as it relates to attracting foreign investments. What are some of the key industries that attract the most investment and why?
First of all, I think our biggest advantage is just when we think about foreign investment is from a geopolitical standpoint, there's real stability here within the Yukon. We have really focused on working collaboratively with our Indigenous governments. There's 11 of the 14 First Nation governments here in the Yukon that have modern treaties that are called self-government agreements that are constitutionally protected. To give you a sense, there's only 26 of these treaties across Canada, and of course 11 of them here. These agreements, of course, are key tools when we think about things such as reconciliation, collaboration, and inclusion of our Indigenous governments within our overall economy. So our First Nations governments are playing such a key role in moving our economy forward and are very active in a number of different sectors. Again, they also provide clarity and stability when we think about our governance structure. One thing we're hearing now from a global perspective, investors are very focused on ESG metrics. And of course, part of that is looking at the governance structure. So we think we have basically the most progressive systems in the country here in Canada where First Nations play such a key role. Part of what they do as well is help us from a nation building standpoint, but also with our government to government relations. Indigenous governments play a key role in our oversight on our environment. They're part of our regulatory system. Our assessment system, our environmental assessment system actually has representatives from the federal government, the territorial government, and from Indigenous governments. As well, these agreements create relationship between our governments and like any relationship, it's a constant back and forth. We have a very collaborative relationship with our First Nations. And so we have a platform called the Yukon Forum. And the Yukon Forum is a series of meetings that happen quarterly where all First Nation leaders are at the table with the government of Yukon. So it's chaired by the Grand Chief of the Council of Yukon First Nations and the Premier. And all of the ministers and cabinet in the Yukon are at that table. And that's where we essentially look at our priorities, identify our areas of work where we're collaborating on together. And there's over a dozen different working groups that have come out of that particular work. So again, I think that for us, that becomes a real key. It's just we see the tensions in many places in the country, and having these relationships the way they are, there's always challenges, but it's really trying to build a foundation of trust so you can have those tough conversations. So I think when people are looking at investing in the resource sector, which is extremely hot right now, lots of activity looking to happen in 2021, that's some of the things that they take into consideration as well. When you think about infrastructure, a lot of people would know we're connecting today from you're in Montreal and I'm here, and we're saying, hey, what a great signal we have or connectivity. We're continuing to invest in that. We're working with Bell Canada, Northwest Health, its subsidiary here. We have a very robust plan over the next 36 months where we're going to be rolling out new infrastructure, essentially fiber to the home. We're looking at about 95% of folks in the Yukon having new fiber to their home. That will mean we'll be the most connected province or territory in the country, even though we're up here in the north. We also are in the midst of building a 777 kilometer fiber line, which goes from just outside of Dawson City, Yukon, right to the Beaufort Sea. It's really important for us to provide redundancy to our telecom, but also it's going to shore up and give redundancy to the entire north, as it will help us build one giant loop in northern Canada. So that's, again, very, very exciting stuff when it comes to a modern economy and a knowledge-based economy and where people are going. Even in the resource extraction industry, we're seeing such changes where you need, when we look at automation, when we look at so many new key factors in that industry. So having the ability to have a real strong backbone is so important when it comes to your telecom.
How would the Yukon continue to position itself to attract more foreign direct investment and talent, by the way, given that in all fairness, if people think of Canada, they don't necessarily think about investing in Yukon. They probably think about Toronto, Vancouver, maybe Montreal.
We try to make sure that we tell our story effectively and efficiently, not just at a domestic level, but internationally. And what I mean by that is on the resource side, there's been about a decade-long history of something called the Yukon Mining Alliance. The work's been validated because we have different states and provinces in the country that are much, much bigger, and they're trying to emulate what we do. We know how important this industry is. We know the history of this in this country, and we know the great opportunity for generations to come. And we know how important it is if the world's going to do what it says it's going to do on a clean tech economy. And we believe extracting copper in the Yukon, where maximum benefits go to a First Nations government, and there's local jobs and a fair but stringent environmental regime in place, that's where that commodity should be coming from, versus somewhere where workers aren't treated as well, the environmental assessment might not be as strong, all of those things that could happen in another jurisdiction. So I think from our standpoint, we'll continue to be very aggressive in how we tell our story, and that's seemed to work. I mean, when you think about provinces and territories in the country, they've come together. The Invest Canada strategy. We also have a team that's been pulled together across Northern Canada to tell our story. And in my work, I chaired the mining ministers table last year with the federal minister. And my sense is, Canada will need to continue to tell its story in an effective way and share those opportunities. I think it's going to be really important for, the Canadian Mines and Minerals Plan, which has been signed off by all jurisdictions. The work will have to be done there, and then it'll be important to tell our own story. So we have a pretty good sense of how to do that.
We live in a world where especially the newer generation, and in fact also the investment community, are increasingly focused on social and environmental responsibility. Do you feel that this approach that you have sort of positions you quite favorably to continue growing and attracting more foreign direct investment in the coming years?
On the environmental side, our assessment process was defined by federal legislation in 2003. It is extremely unique. Again, it has representation on their executive committee from both appointed by Indigenous governments, federal government, territorial government. So in that case, we think from environmental part of the conversation, we think we're getting it right, and we have a robust system to ensure that an investor has the comfort that whatever activity is happening is done in the appropriate way. On a social side, we've learned, like all areas, but I think we've learned quick that it's so important to have to think about things from an industrial side, and how does that parallel or how does that integrate into your society? And it really is about benefits, ensuring that the social fabric's taken into consideration when it comes to impact, and making sure that your community is benefiting from this activity versus, having challenges that are caused by it. And so that comes back to making sure people in our community are part of those projects, making sure there's good benefit agreements, making sure that the infrastructure that's built for those projects also has a benefit to our communities, all of that. And then on the governance side, we're pleasantly surprised that the world is turning its eye towards ESG. On the governance side, as I stated, you're not going to find a state, province, or territory in North America that has that level of engagement with the Indigenous governments which lands we're on. Here in Whitehorse, I'm lucky today to be on the traditional territory of the Kwamindun First Nation and the Tonquachi Council, two of our self-governing First Nations. And And within that work, those are the things that an analyst wants to see when they look through this. So we feel we're very well positioned. We've been very well positioned before anybody even used the acronym or started talking ESG. So again, what we're doing now is just sharing that we meet the targets of the investors, and of course, we feel that's a great advantage.
Deputy Premier, do you have any additional points that you still wanted to make before we end this interview?
I'd share a few points. I mean, we're undertaking some interesting processes now that I think it's important to share with your listeners. Again, focused on that ESG conversation, we still want to bring in, how we do things even moving forward from a standpoint of accountability. So we just undertook a very rigorous process where we had an independent panel go out to speak to all Yukoners, very significant engagement. We also had that panel reach out to different provinces and territories, like the Northwest Territories, as well as Quebec, looking at Plan Nord projects. So a number of different areas. And they have come back with about 80 recommendations. And now the government of Yukon is looking at those recommendations. Industry is looking at those recommendations, as well as First Nations governments. And we'll be seeing a final report in the spring of this year. That's that level of engagement on policy and public policy coming into a sector. I don't think we've seen in the country. We're proud of it, but that will lead to modernization, really, so that we can stay ahead of what's happening at a global level. So again, even though it's a small jurisdiction, it's something that we feel very important. Again, I think over the next year, we're going to see a very exciting time with all of the things that you and I've had a chance to talk about today. Hundreds of millions into big infrastructure energy projects, new mines being built, and then of course other areas of our economy. I think our contribution to GDP on the tourism side was only second to Prince Edward Island. So again, as you shared, there's so many opportunities here in the Yukon. Close by saying we've had the lowest unemployment rate in the country for 4 years in a row. There's only been a couple of months that we haven't had the lowest, but on average for the last 4 years. So, we're still lots of opportunity for individuals as they think about what the future is and what they're going to path they're going to take for their careers. And again, many different opportunities. So again, thank you for an opportunity to speak with you today, and always happy to share a little bit about this amazing place called Yukon.